Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie and today I'm delighted to be joined by Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Liz, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Oh, I am doing great, and thank you so much for having me. I love being here with you. You know that.
Excellent. And yeah, it's great to have you join us once again, and especially to discuss this really big news actually, which came out yesterday at the time of filming this. And that is that Avaya has emerged from its bankruptcy after, I think it was
Yeah.
76 days after it was first announced. I guess the first question for you is simply, what are your top takeaways from the announcement?
I think that my top takeaway is that Avaya did what it said it was going to do, and I think that's probably the most important thing for Avaya's current customers, right? Because I think that there was a lot of uncertainty when the news was first. I mean, because we had a kind of an odd cadence, right? The news was kind of first leaked, kind of eased us into the idea at the end of 2022 that this was going to happen, or at least was a possibility. So when they announced that they had gone into Chapter 11 proceedings and were looking to restructure their debt through the courts, uh, there was a sense of, okay, should Avaya customers should be nervous? Like, should we be a little worried that this might not go the way Avaya has said it's going to go? And so I think it's really important that they said that it was going to be a 60 to 90 day time period. It was going to be a very fast proceeding to restructure this debt and to restructure where the finances were, and that we're about the 72 mark, right? So was it a 60 on the nose? No. But was it 90? No. Did it go beyond that? No. So I think that it's really important, at least for me, to say, okay, they did what they said they were going to do, and now we need to start looking towards the future. What's that next road mark? What's that next kind of point at which they said something was going to happen? And did they reach that marker?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it was kind of towards the back end of 2022. It was a slow drip feed of bad news almost
It was.
until we got
It was.
that to that point. But yeah, it's great that they've emerged from that now. I think they have like 600 million of liquidity to use, and their debts have been slashed almost by two-thirds or something like that.
Yes.
But it does make you think this isn't the first time they've gone through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Do you feel more optimistic this time around than you did back in 2017?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do, to be honest with you, because I think this was a very different beast. There was a lot more uncertainty, the first time. And I think that what we saw in the lead up to this filing were a lot of acquisitions, a lot of spend, a lot of kind of investment into things that were almost going counter to where the industry was taking us, i.e., to the cloud. And there was almost this misplaced defiance of, no, we're going to do this the Avaya way. And I think the thought through a lot of our heads was, yeah, but the Avaya way landed us in court last time. Like this kind of wasn't maybe the right path to go. And a lot of the same behaviors were reemerging. So I think that this time it's very much a shortened time period. If we remember the previous bankruptcy filing, I believe it was about a year to a year and a half that they were in this renegotiation. However, I think that with the new leadership team, there was a sense of, we are going to go do this with a sense of precision. We're going to pre-negotiate with our debt holders. We are going to have this conversation in the open to some degree. So you're right. It was this kind of very slow drip of bad news that was really a downer, like towards the end of 2022, when we were like, I think a lot of folks, and if you kind of landed on the more pessimistic side of conversation, there was a sense that this is it. Like, end of 2022, this is going to be the end of Avaya. And so then if you capped that with, okay, they did actually go to court, it was really easy to land on that side of the street. But I think for those of us who were not only speaking with the executives, but speaking with Avaya customers, there wasn't a sense of panic. And I think that was the biggest difference, in that in 2017, there was a sense of, okay, what are we supposed to do? Like, we're in this. Like, we are in this. What are we going to do? I think that this time there wasn't that sense of, okay, we've got to brace. This is going to be really bad. So
Yeah.
I think that this was more of a slow roll to reorganization. It wasn't where a lot of people wanted Avaya to be, but I think it was the smartest path for them. I think the critical days are going to be the next 90 days, the next 120 days. But it was very different.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say there, actually, they released sort of a pack a few months ago, and it still shows they have, I think, 90 of the 40 of the Fortune 100 companies still under their umbrella, which is quite incredible, actually, considering
Yeah,
everything that's happened in the past few years. And they have a huge base of legacy customers which have stayed
huge.
that loyal. But do you think this saga may impact Avaya's attractiveness as CCaaS migration partner when a lot of these legacy customers eventually move away from on-premise?
I think the reality here is, if we're being pragmatic, the reason why so many of those customers have stayed isn't necessarily a deep, binding love
Hmm.
of the brand. I think it's the reality here is that a lot of on-premise customers remain on-prem for a reason. And whether that reason is because they believe they need to stay on-prem because of the complexity of their business, because regulatory demands on their business, whatever, there's a lot of folks that sit in that category. But there are also a lot of folks that have built so many really, truly complex, interwoven customizations to their system, that looking at that and saying, oh, well, I'm just going to move it to the cloud. It's not that easy. There's no magic wand that just moves you to the cloud. And I think that we're learning that across all industries. If you look at any industry, not just necessarily UCaaS and CCaaS, right? If we look across the entirety of CX and wonder, why are people still on on-prem ERP? Is because it's really complex to move, right? It's really hard to unbind all of those complications, all of those customizations. So I think the reality here is that what has happened between the first bankruptcy proceeding and yesterday's announcement, or their current state with Avaya, is that it's not so much that the customization and the complexity of their on-prem instance has changed. I think the mindset has changed. You've got more customers saying, oh, wait a minute, I can move to cloud. I can make this shift. I just don't necessarily want to lift and shift in one motion, right? It's not this idea of, oh, I'm just going to move from here to there. It's not a proximity issue. So I think that people are taking their time and they're wanting to see what workloads, what systems, what areas of their entirety of their contact center, the entirety of their communication system, what can we start to move? And who does it make sense to move? Avaya is in an interesting position in that conversation because they know their customers deeply. They
Yeah.
also understand why those customizations came to be, that there are processes on the customer's side, right? A lot of customizations are because the customer has operational workflows, the customer has operational patterns. They're just working a certain way, right? And you're not going to get that old dog to make, to try a new trick all of a sudden. So I think Avaya is in a really interesting position to be that shepherd, to show their on-prem customers how they don't necessarily have to move everything all at once. You
Hmm.
can start to move specific workloads. You can move operations that make sense. So I think they're in a very interesting position. They're also in a very precarious position because I think that, they do not necessarily have the reputation today of being the most innovative, of being the forward leading cloud pioneers. Like they do not have that pole position. So I think it's going to be really, really important, certainly across 2023, to not necessarily try to occupy that position. They can't buy their way into being the front runner in innovation. What they can do, however, is remain the trusted partner,
Hmm.
the partner that meets its goals, that says what they're going to do, that is transparent in their roadmap, that doesn't use the aspirational, oh, all of a sudden we're all AI, but oh, by the way, it's not going to be here for another 2 years. Like, don't be that partner, right? You've got to be the partner that is very transparent and says what you're going to do, and then you do exactly what you said you were going to do and meet every single deadline to do it. And that is a very, very tall operational order for Avaya. But, I think that so far in Q1, they've hit their roadmap from a technology perspective. What they say they are announcing, they have announced and is available and is, there is a real tangible product for their customers. And then I think the bankruptcy proceeding is just kind of another chapter in that. But it's going to be interesting because, they can't be the new shiny kid on the block. They miss that.
Yeah, and I really liked your analogy actually of being the shepherd almost into the CCaaS space. Now that very much does align with their vision. Obviously, they've got their on-premise, they've got their CCaaS, but they also have this hybrid. I think it's called innovation without disruption. That strategy
Yes.
to take parts of the on-premise and move them into the cloud slowly. And I think that does seem like the logical approach, and it's the approach they're very much going for. So that would almost give you hope. And I thought it was actually interesting as well, is they announced a new board, and somebody from that board was from Genesys, somebody who left Genesys. The name eludes me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The board's super interesting. And I will say that the board also includes the chief marketing officer from Teradata.
Hmm.
So you have someone who is not only a seasoned marketing, and I would argue seasoned marketing and experience leader of multiple organizations, but you have someone who is deeply, deeply connected to the world of data. And that is going to be the next battleground. In fact, it likely is already the next battleground. I think we tend to focus a lot on calls and agents and dashboards, but the reality is what's happening in the rest of the enterprise is this mad search for data, right? We are looking for that better understanding of what is happening to our business and our operations. We're also trying to figure out what is going on with our customer. And across CCaaS, and arguably across UCaaS as well, we have this trove of data that has not necessarily been actioned upon or brought into the rest of the organization. It has been used in contact center, it has been used in service, but it hasn't necessarily been deployed across the organization. So I think it's a really interesting board that's, been brought together because now you have this voice that can come out of data
Hmm.
and really say, hey, that's actually not what's happening. That's actually not, hey, this is what's happening. And Teradata itself has gone through not only kind of reimagining of what and who Teradata is for this modern age, but they're very successfully now rebuilding that business. So I think it's a really interesting shift to bring very new voices to the board. I also think these are voices that are going to challenge.
Yeah.
These are not voices that are going to be passive and just sit idly by and say, "Oh, great, you're Avaya. You've been doing this for so long. Keep doing it." I don't think that's what they sought out. I think they sought out individuals that were going to challenge the status quo. I do think the addition of someone, of kind of former Genesys is quite interesting because I think there's a lot of chatter, especially amongst my colleagues, that love to pick up on some of the things that Genesys is saying about how many customers they pick up from Avaya, right? I think it's this like, there's this really kind of familiar conversation circle that happens. And it goes a little something like, this is how many customers I've picked up from Avaya, but that's great. There's another conversation that's happening in the market, which is this is how many customers I picked up from Genesys. Like there tend to be two or three logos. Like this is how many I picked up from Cisco. Well, this is how many I picked up from Avaya. Well, this is how many I picked up from Genesys. So it ends up being this oddly circular discussion of
Hmm.
who picked up whose logos. So I do think it's interesting to bring in someone who is so deeply understanding of the competitive set. I think we have people who are going to challenge the direction. I think we have people who are going to challenge the sales and engagement motion. And I think that clearly with their new leadership team and with their new CEO, it's people who are going to look for a far more pragmatic approach to re-envisioning who Avaya is going to be in 2024, as opposed to let's keep looking out, what's Avaya 2040? It's like, let's get to 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of you mentioned you gave some really great insights about the new board of directors, and I guess that's another reason for optimism. We're talking about reasons for optimism earlier, is that this time it is a completely different board of directors leading this charge. But I kind of think maybe the best place sort of conclude this discussion would be simply to ask you, kind of in your opinion, what must Avaya do to maintain its status from now and into the future, to maintain its status as an enterprise communication stalwart and
Yeah.
avoid a bankruptcy 3.0, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, God. Avoid overspending. Yeah, like more than anything, do not land in Chapter 11 proceedings a third time in 10 years. Probably the number one piece of advice that I have. No, in all seriousness, Charlie, I think that it's really going to come down to, again, pragmatic delivery of value,
Hmm.
right? And if I were to, offer one hope for Avaya is that they hold on to that. That to, I think that what led us here to, bankruptcy 2.0 was both this sense that they were going to look too far out into the horizon while also simultaneously navel gazing. And that's a very weird, place to be in, where you think that you are going to be the one pushing disruption and pushing innovation into the future, yet you don't look to see what's happening around you. And I think that's what Avaya got caught in, if we're just being super honest about it. I think that what I am looking for in, let's say, the next 6 months, and arguably the next 12 months, is again that adherence to this is what we're delivering, this is what we've delivered, and this is what the impact is, where there's not going to be this aspirational, you know, linguistic basket weaving to try to bend over backwards to say all the great things that are happening. I expect radical transparency, right? I expect honesty in the reporting of, hey, here are things that went well, here are things that didn't, but this is what we're going to do to not only keep our customers moving forward for their business, but then keeping our business moving forward as well. So, I think it's be honest, be transparent, but be on time every time. That's the only thing that was really going to give that underpinning of trust that Avaya's customers have to have in that company. So don't get caught into the swirl of you're losing all your customers. Genesys is taking all your customers away. Five9 is taking all you. Like there's this kind of desire to get caught up into that. It's instead, I would say, double down that focus into what your customers are doing and where your prospects are showing interest. And if where your prospects are showing interest is in an aggressive move to cloud, ensure that you have the right people and the right talent to guide that aggressive move, right? If what your customers and prospects are showing is they actually want to have a far more pragmatic approach, share what that pragmatic approach is. I think that no one really has some mystery secret sauce here in communications. Everyone kind of has the same flavor, just different color logo sometimes. I think where Avaya can really step forward and lean forward is going to be in that quality, consistency, and trustworthiness of how they move forward as a company.
Yeah, I think there's some really great advice there actually, which maybe expands beyond Avaya, especially kind of in these maybe economic.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.
But yeah, I think that's a great place to end today's conversation. Liz, it's always great to speak to you. I learned so much, so thank you very much for
Of
taking the time to speak
course.
with us.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
Excellent. And also, thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.